About 10 days after 9/11, I went through the Pentagon and I saw Secretary Rumsfeld and Deputy Secretary Wolfowitz. I went downstairs just to say hello to some of the people on the Joint Staff who used to work for me. And one of the generals called me in. He said, "Sir, you got to come in. You got to come in and talk to me a second." I said, "Well, you're too busy." He said, "No." He says, "We've made the decision. We're going to war with Iraq." This was on or about the 20th of September. I said, "We're going to war with Iraq. Why?" He said, "I don't know." He said, "I guess they don't know what else to do." So I said, "Well, did they find some information connecting Saddam to Al-Qaeda?" He said, No. He says, "There's nothing new that way. They just made the decision to go to war with Iraq." He said, "I guess it's like we don't know what to do about terrorists, but we've got a good military and we can take down governments." And he said, "I guess if the only tool you have is a hammer, every problem has to look like a nail." So I came back to see him a few weeks later, and by that time we were bombing in Afghanistan. I said, "Are we still going to war with Iraq?" And he said, "Oh, it's worse than that." He said, he reached over on his desk, he picked up a piece of paper, and he said, I just got this down from upstairs," meaning the Secretary of Defense's office today, and he said, "This is a memo that describes how we're going to take out 7 countries in 5 years, starting with Iraq and then Syria, Lebanon, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and finishing off Iran."
Disarm a country you don't like. I mean, if that were the case, it would be a recipe for global chaos, because lots of countries have adversaries. There is absolutely no basis under international law to preventively or preemptively disarm a country you don't like. I mean, if that were the case, it would be a recipe for global chaos, because lots of countries have adversaries.
Ladies and gentlemen, how's it going, Alex Suarez?
Hello, comrade. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you very, very well. Let me turn down my mic because I'm loud. Everybody's loud in my ear. Perfect.
Are we live?
Yes, we are.
Great.
And I want to first talk about first introduce Alex Suarez real quick, because there's a big announcement to talk about here. Me and Alex Suarez have been doing episodes, quite a few throughout the year, and I feel like that we built this chemistry, and I wanted to bring him on not only because of how well we have conducted episodes together, but also to have him as a host because of how important his expertise are in this fight to change the world, and also how important his passion and willingness to make sure everything is right as we continue on this struggle as working class people. Alex Suarez is a historian and also an activist journalist. He is involved with the Who rules. He is also was involved with the Occupy, which has inspired a lot of new generational leftists. So I'm honored to have my good friend here, Alex Suarez, as one of the co-host, the host of Unsavory Politik.
Well, it's your show that you founded, so I call you the host. I just be a co-host, and I've co-hosted shows before. I believe you were on. Is either you were on Eclectic Radical, Chris Richards' show before, or he was on your show? Which way was it? I don't remember.
He was on my show first, and then I had him on my on.
Oh,
then
okay,
he had
both.
me on his
Yeah,
show.
because I've connected with you people too. I used to co-host his show for a while as well, and I've helped you out with guests behind the scenes in the past. So it's an honor to work with you now that I have some free time to do that.
Yeah.
In the next year. I wanted to mention how similar what's going on in Syria right now with the fall of Yugoslavia. I want to show a book. By the way, if I could sum myself up in 2 words, it'd be revolutionary writer. But I am an historian. I'm glad you point that out. A lot of people don't know that about me. They know about my journalist side. But yeah, before you show that image, I would want to show this book I'm reading right now.
Yep.
That's fascinating. It's a biography of Tito. Within 10 years of his death, in 1990, Yugoslavia started to get torn apart. And that's the year before the fall of the Soviet Union. Although Yugoslavia was not a satellite of the Soviet Union, Tito was not under Stalin's sphere, nor under the West sphere. He was his own man. He was a socialist, much like we saw with Gaddafi in Libya, with Assad in Syria.
Right.
For example, Assad was allied with Putin, but was not an agent of Putin. And there's a secret deal, probable secret deal between Putin and the West that I want to expose on this show. I'm very rarely critical of Putin because he's fighting Nazis right now in Ukraine. But I think this deal, if true, if confirmed, is outrageous. It's comparable to Premier Brezhnev, who was a terrible leader, unlike Khrushchev, who was highly supportive of revolutions in Latin America. When Che went into Bolivia, he was abandoned by the Bolivian Communist Party. Why? Because of pressure from Brezhnev. Because Brezhnev made a deal with Johnson in the late 1960s that the Soviets would not support revolution in Latin America if the United States stopped supporting like Radio Free Europe, the counter-revolution in Eastern Europe that was under mostly the Soviet sphere at the time, except for Yugoslavia, because the Balkans is also part of Eastern Europe. But now you see a similar deal potentially. You see the Balkanization of Syria. You see public institutions that were built by the socialist Assad that are literally being blown to pieces by Israel. People are confused, right? They're like, okay, everybody knows that Golani and these jihadis were supported by Israel. Everybody knows that at this point. So why, once they took over and Assad went to exile in Russia, you're free to show those images. It did, those are good images. Al Jazeera is a very good source. But yeah, it's like, why did they bomb the very people that they just put into power? Because they were destroying the institutions. Because now they're declaring they want to transition to a so-called free market capitalism. Same thing happened in Yugoslavia. All those social programs, all those social institutions that were built by Tito and the socialists in a united Yugoslavia were balkanized. That's where the word the Balkans, right? That's where Yugoslavia is. That's where the word balkanized comes from, with how NATO divided it up. The same that you're seeing with Syria today.
Right. Yeah. I mean, and what we seen a reaction from what I saw and from the West and also from Syrians, there was a bit of a disconnect with there were Syrians that were very celebratory of Assad's fall, which I understand because he wasn't a great leader, and half of his family owned the economy, and yes, there was bad things that has happened.
Yeah, but he protected religious minorities, so it depends who you are, right? If you're
I was just about to say
Syrian,
that. Yep.
If you're a Sunni Syrian, you might not mind so much these guys took over, but they're going to go after all the other minorities, the Christians, the Alawites, the Shia. Assad was an Alawite himself, which is an affiliate of the Shia. And the Alawite religion is similar to the Christian religion. They respect the Christian religion, unlike a lot of these extremist Sunnis. Not all of them are that way. For example, Assad's wife is Sunni. Their children are half Sunni, half Alawite. So the sectarian divide was instigated by the West, propagated in particular by the Israeli Mossad and the American CIA. We know that. And now we have the incubators again, right? Just like the Gulf War. You have this so-called CNN journal go in and say, oh, I just helped release a prisoner who just saw light for the first time in 3 months. He's looking right up at the sun. His eyes aren't even squinting. Like, I'll go to the beach and I'll put sunglasses on and I'll take them off for a second and I'll squint more than what that guy supposedly who was in complete darkness for 3 months. Like, they didn't even stage it right. It was like so obvious. And she did the same thing in Gaza a couple months ago. She's under attack by Hamas. Hamas and the Palestinians are desperate to have journalist access there. They would treat the journalists like royals, whoever could get into Gaza, because they want to show the plight of their people. Who are targeting journalists with snipers? Who are targeting Christians in Gaza with snipers? Is the Israeli Zionist thugs. And there was a recent debate, sadly, with an Arab Jew and Finkelstein on Piers Morgan's show recently. I don't remember the name of this Arab Jew, but she's a Zionist. And you know, she's was talking about, Christian women in Israel are the most benefited of the societies and this and that. And when she was asked about the words of the Pope about the nuns that were attacked in Gaza, where he called the Israelis, rightly so, terrorists, she said there are no Christians in Gaza. I mean, this is the Zionists. They deny the obvious. They deny what's in front of them. And that only the most indoctrinated and insane ideologues will continue to go along with these Zionist lies. And it's been exposed for years that Assad, who was the last secular progressive leader against the Zionists in the region after Libya fell, you know, that the Israelis were backing these jihadis, just like the CIA backed Al-Qaeda back in the day against the Russians in Afghanistan, to depose Assad. And so why did they bomb the very people that they installed right after? Again, they're look what they're targeting. They're targeting the institutions, the legacy of socialism of Assad, so they can make it a privatized, balkanized, free market, so-called free market capitalism that's imposed on the Syrian people. Yeah.
And it's very, very important because it's very, very important to talk about like the breakdown on what kind of government Assad was, because it explains how anti-imperialist, even though it was a very flawed government with the corruption of the military, which we're going to get into. It was showing that there was
the military in Syria. The military in Syria is not the same as the military in Egypt. If you're talking about the military in Egypt, I'm completely 100% agreeing with you. They're very corrupt. They're very sold out to the Israelis. The military in Syria were very similar to the military under Nasser in Egypt, a very progressive socialist military, much like you see in Venezuela, much like it was in the 1950s in Egypt. Now, the Arab military that's in Egypt, I agree with you, they're extremely corrupt. But the military elements within Syrian society tend to be progressive. Now they've been taken over by the militant jihadis.
Yeah, well, what I was gearing to is with Jamal Thomas showing the report of how there was basically, which coincides with the deal that you were talking about, that when Assad told them to step down, not step down, but to stand down, he was already on the plane towards Moscow.
Okay, you're talking about when he had the opportunity.
Reported.
I just want to make sure, I want to clarify what you're saying. You're talking about when Assad had the opportunity with the support of the Houthis and Iran to try to retake the Golan Heights. That's Syrian occupied territory by Israel. Is that what you're talking about?
No, I'm talking about when Assad decided to leave, and then he told the Syrian.
You're talking about when he decided to take asylum in Russia.
Right.
That was because Damascus was surrounded. Him and his family probably would have ended up like Gaddafi and his son and killed and tortured.
Right. And they was explaining that the soldiers felt the soldiers that were still active fighting. They were saying that they felt betrayed, but then you found out there was also soldiers scattered about. I think there were plants from Al Qaeda, HTS, whatever name they want to call themselves.
Infiltration is possible, but I'd have to research more the interaction between Assad and his military. I'll put it this way: look at bodyguards, right? And
Right.
Putin said this in an interview. Actually, I believe it was an interview with Oliver Stone. The American filmmaker. When Oliver Stone said, do you fear assassination? Putin said, I had a conversation once with Fidel Castro. And Fidel said, and the GI tried to kill Fidel over 600 times. He lived to age 90. Putin said his response to that was, I had a conversation with Fidel Castro. And Fidel said, if you don't want them to kill you, select your own bodyguards.
Right.
And that was the biggest mistake of Pedro Castillo in Peru. And
Don't forget, that was also the big mistake of the original person in Chile, Allende. He was also warned too.
I don't know about the bodyguard situation with Allende. I can get into
not the bodyguards. He was telling him about you have to have the military on your side. That's what he wanted.
No, I know. He was doing his best that he could in that regard, but he was betrayed.
Right.
That's another story. But Fidel said, select your own bodyguard. So what happened with Pedro Castillo was he was on his way to the Mexican embassy. He was going to take asylum in Mexico, where his family ultimately went, because by then it was clear he was going to be deposed. And he's still in a Peruvian jail with full U.S. support, of course, against Peruvian democracy. And he was acting within the Peruvian constitution. And who stopped him from taking asylum was his bodyguards, because he made the mistake of not picking his own security. Now, that could have, and I'm only speculating at this point, happened with Assad. His own security forces, might have pressured him to go on to Russia, because they knew that they were going to be overwhelmed by the jihadis who could possibly, torture him in a very horrific manner, like what was done to Gaddafi and his son.
Right. Well, Mark Slobloda reported something very similar to what you're saying. Mark Slobloda said that Putin warned back when Russia first helped and defeat the American-backed ISIL.
That was probably under Obama, like 2015. Yeah, the Syrian civil war, I think, started around 2014, 2015, a couple years into the Arab Spring. Yeah.
Right. He said that Putin warned Assad that some of your generals, some of your officials are for hire and are not actual alliance. And
let me tell you about Pinochet. You mentioned Chile. So you're correct in the sense that when Pinochet took over Allende, he was portraying himself as a nonpartisan military guy. When in fact he was in touch with the Americans. He was a fascist. He was a traitor. So he appointed, I think it was General Schneider that was fired by Allende, and Schneider was, not necessarily plotting against Allende, but they had some differences. And once Schneider stepped down, even in his farewell address before he killed himself in the presidential palace in Chile, he mentioned Schneider. He thought Schneider was behind this. He didn't even know it was Pinochet yet. But Pinochet ordered the bombing of the presidential palace and, the torture and imprisonment and assassination of tens of thousands of leftists in Chile, which started a reign of terror on September 11th of 1973. Right. So it was a betrayal by somebody infiltrating higher ups in the generals that overtook Allende. And he was warned about it, but there wasn't much he could do about it. And also a lot of people were overestimating the institutions of Chile, which was a very democratic society in the 1970s in comparison to a lot of parts of Latin America at the time. Now, literally, they're bombing those institutions in Syria that are democratic institutions. Yeah. Assad was elected. I actually know Dan Kovalik, who's in Lebanon right now. He might go into Syria. He was an election observer, not just in Venezuela with me, but he was an observer of the presidential elections that got Assad reelected. Right. So there are large swaths, including Sunnis, again, some of Assad's own family, his wife is Sunni, that support Assad. It's the more extreme elements that are the most willing to sell out to the West that have opposed Assad and that now are consolidating power and massacring. I've already seen videos of massacres of religious minorities in various towns in Syria. It's quite tragic. It's in the context of anti-imperialism. It's a setback. It's because Syria was the only one really standing up, a secular progressive leader to the West and to the Zionist forces.
Well, I think I think as of right now, it's definitely important to look at this and monitor it as the same formula of so many regime changes that the United States have led in the past as well too. And just for and I know a lot of Syrians have spoken to me and said that they want to celebrate right now that Assad is gone, but they are also well aware that Israel is going to carve up their land, and they're also well aware that Turkey is also going to have influence, which it was a very much shocker that to me that Erdogan was going to do this.
What
I'm
does
really not
Erdogan
surprised
do?
of how
What does Erdogan
connected.
say, right? So what he does
Right,
is do business with Israel, co-invade Syria,
right,
right? That's what he does
right.
in action, which was what matters. Rhetorically, he's anti-Israel. When they tried to stage another flotilla to Gaza, I know people that were in the first flotilla in 2010 that left from Turkey. The second one they tried to do post-October 7th, Erdogan no longer supported it. They had no chance. They had no Turkish government backing. Why? Because he's a coward, because he's afraid of being deposed if he opposes Israel in action. So only in words will he oppose them. There's even been Zionist lobbies that have told American politicians, we don't care what you think about us in private. We don't even care what you say to us off the record, say about us off the record in private. As long as in public you support Israel, we'll leave you alone.
Right.
So
Yeah.
basically, Erdogan is owned by Israel just as much as a lot of American politicians are.
Yeah.
So, and actually with him, it's in public, but what matters is the action. Regardless, I'm talking about hypocrisy. This is proven. Erdogan is a complete hypocrite and coward, and he's trying to re-Ottomize Syria, but by selling out and working with the Zionists, which is a complete betrayal.
I made a video. I showed a video before you came on. The UN reported that it's actually against international law to decapitate a country to defend itself, and that's exactly what Israel is doing, bombing the military depots and everything.
But I said against who? I said you're bombing Syria after Assad left.
Exactly.
Who are you defending yourself from? Everybody know Golani's pro-Israel. When they ask
people
who do you oppose,
people should ask Mohammed al-Golani.
We only oppose Hezbollah and Iran.
Right. Yeah, and people should ask Mohammed al-Golani, why the hell aren't you doing anything about this? This is now your weapons. This is now your depots now.
Well, they didn't just go after the social institutions. They went after the defense capabilities, everything. Yeah. In case Assad returns,
air support,
the military
overturns
the coup and brings Assad back. Then Assad won't have any means to defend himself anymore, or any means to make it a progressive, developing society.
Yeah, to be clear for the audience,
they remain backward, remain in a medieval state. That's what Israel wants.
Exactly. To be clear for the audience, there is no more air support. There is no more counter air support. There's no more Navy. There's it's all gone. There's tanks. There's videos of tanks.
So I didn't finish my point. I'm sorry. Let me just say this real quick. I didn't finish my point about the deal. Pepe Escobar, I want to name the source. It wasn't me. Pepe Escobar is a respected alternative journalist, said he has sources in the Kremlin. He's used these sources before, and they turned out to be right, that are saying that there was a secret deal between Trump and Putin. And that deal consisted of basically Putin having free reign in Ukraine. In exchange, the United States and Israel have free reign in the Middle East. And I completely oppose such a deal if that's what the case was. The deal is the equivalent of Brezhnev's betrayal of Che Guevara and the revolution in Latin America in cahoots with the Johnson regime and the imperialists at the time in the 1960s.
Wow. Putin has said multiple times in speeches that he is not anti-Western. Putin said multiple times in his speeches that he
wanted to join NATO. We ignored this before, but it's true. He wanted to join NATO in the beginning.
Right. So I'm not at all shocked that he will make a decision that way. But this is not only just, this is not only just a shocker on the movement of Palestine, because regardless of how Assad felt about Palestine was getting resistance support and Hezbollah as well was getting weapons.
Have you seen the encounters between Putin and Netanyahu?
Right.
They're pretty friendly. So Putin has always taken a kind of a nuanced position when it came to the Middle East, sometimes appearing pro-Arab, sometimes not. But he's very opportunistic. If he's going to give a free rein for the Trump regime and continue their agenda in the Middle East, that's not good. I mean, I'd love to see peace in Ukraine, but at the expense of people of color, at the expense of the oppressed nations, the Arab people? Hell no.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, I mean, we all know that Putin is a pragmatic leader. And
but what is pragmatism, right? Pragmatism to me is not the same thing as optimism. Sorry,
no, it's
not
not
the same thing no, wait, I didn't make a point. It's not the same thing as opportunism.
Opportunism, yes.
To me, there's nothing wrong with being pragmatic, finding realistic solutions, but being opportunistic to me is ruthless.
Yeah, and earlier in the reports, because I've been listening to reports all freaking week since it started. People were saying at first that this may weaken Russia. I disagree. And now they're saying, no, it's not going to weaken Russia. Russia is going to be able to focus on what they want to focus on now, and they will get done what they need to get done, which I exactly agree with. And in this, at the cost of Syria being carved up, Russia is going to do exactly what they need to do to get their gains against NATO and against Ukraine. They don't have to worry about the Middle East as much anymore. The only ally they have now is Iran, and that's not really, much of a big deal to them as much as Syria was. Syria, they had to actually help out. Syria, they had to actually send aid to. They spend millions of dollars.
I would say more than anyone.
Yeah,
the Houthis in Yemen,
right,
have actively resisted the genocide. They've stopped ships in the Red Sea,
and
they're still holding out. I really have hope for the Houthis. But again, I'm not really into religious fundamentalism. Unlike Assad, who was a secular leader, the Houthis tend to be religious and divisive, and of course, so is Iran. So Assad, like Gaddafi, who was secular, I was a leader that I supported. I'm very disappointed by this.
Now, what do you think? I have a theory, Alex Suarez. Let's talk about the president of Iran. Now, before the first president, not the first president, his predecessor was murdered. Not murdered, but killed in a helicopter.
No, I think he was murdered because
Azerbaijan. That's what I'm saying. Yeah.
Well, let me tell you, he left from Azerbaijan when his plane crashed. Right. There was 3 helicopters. It just happened to have the helicopter with the president in it that crashed. The other ones were fine. Right. So if it was bad weather, then why the other 2 helicopters land safely?
Exactly.
And so Azerbaijan, this is interesting. So Azerbaijan is a government that is opportunistic. It's under the sphere of the Iranians. Not so much the Russians like the Armenians are. So there's a border dispute between the Armenians and the Azerbaijanis. The Azerbaijanis are basically Turkish, Iranian proxies.
Yes.
And the Armenians are Russian proxies. And that's a long history of that back to the Ottoman Empire, the Armenian genocide. They accused the Armenians of being agents of the Russians and genocided them. And so the Azerbaijanis are also in business with Israel, just like Turkey is.
Right.
So I wouldn't be surprised if within the Azerbaijani government, they had Mossad agents and they planted a bomb on the plane that killed the Iranian president.
No, I won't be surprised. And then also, I won't be surprised, which is my true conspiracy, because I don't have any evidence to back this up. I think the new Iranian president is a plant. I think that he is soft purposely and is trying to be diplomatic with the West purposely.
So do you think when Ismail Haniyeh was killed in Tehran, that the Iranian president knew about it?
Yes. This is my thing. Because when I found out that there was certain...
By the way, for their commentators that don't know who Ismail Haniyeh is, because they might not know
people context.
Players in this. He is a Hamas leader was living in Qatar. He had a state visit in Iran. I believe it was to celebrate the birthday or anniversary of the death of Soleimani. I'm not sure. Soleimani, of course, the Iranian general that was killed by the Trump regime for trying to make peace in Iraq and defeating ISIS in Iraq, trying to make peace between the Saudis and Iranians, which the Chinese helped accomplish later on. Because I remember when they killed Soleimani, I was going to D.C. This was just before COVID. It was around January of 2020. And I thought this could be World War III. It was so insane.
That was
Trump
crazy.
did. And then you had the guy had me on a show once. The show was mixed with like socialists, and then he was more of a kind of a Trump sympathizing guy pretending to be a leftist.
Right.
And he was praising the Chinese, rightly so, for helping the Saudis and Iranians reconcile, right? Because that was a division that the West has always taken advantage of.
Right.
And that strengthens the Middle East. In that sense, I like it. Again, I don't like theocracies, whether they're Saudi or Iranian.
No, we don't.
But the Iranians are anti-imperialist to a degree. when he was praising them, I said, well, unlike Trump, who killed Soleimani for trying to do the same thing, and you should have seen his face.
Yeah.
But that's a lot of hypocrisy that we put up with.
Yeah, but I really do think that the Iranian president is a plant. He's been very pro-Western in this genocide.
Have you heard that from any other source?
No, I've heard it from a friend from Morocco that thinks this, but these are not experts. These are just regular working.
By the way, are there
people.
any comments yet on the YouTube? People might have left comments that we could share questions.
We have to translate this comment.
That looks Farsi to me.
Yeah, that's Farsi.
That's Persian from Iran.
Yeah. We got to translate that. So we'll I'll definitely get a translation because.
Have you been in touch with Zaina? She's part Iranian. She might know Farsi. She could potentially translate that.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I haven't met Zaina. If you can connect me.
She's on the Revolutionary Alliance chat.
But this person, thank you so much for always supporting. This guy right here has supported a lot of my videos. So I definitely want to know what he has to say. This is the Facebook crew right here. Shouts out. Yeah, man.
If that person speaks English or Spanish, they can just translate what they already wrote.
Yeah, if you're listening, if you can do a translation in English, that would be very, very great. Sorry that we don't know Farsi. We're Americans, and we were told that. Well, Alex Suarez is bilingual, but I'm not. I'm not.
I'm fluent in Spanish, but I can understand Portuguese, especially Brazilian Portuguese. I've had a lot of Brazilian friends in the past. So I'm going to speak to me slowly in Portuguese.
Yeah,
other languages.
Oh yeah. And then also, so I saw reports of, we got the CNN that we talked about. She lied.
Disgusting.
I mean,
they had a lady from MTV show up, and there was a poor guy from Lebanon that was on his hospital bed, and she's taking advantage of the situation, just like one of those ambulance chaser lawyers. And she's showing up there with a camera. I don't think she had permission to film him. And she's like, this gentleman was tortured in Assad's prison. He was a Lebanese and blah, blah, blah. And the Lebanese tend to get along with Assad because a lot of them are religious minorities. So that didn't make any sense from the get-go. And then all of a sudden, the family members enter and says, what are you talking about? We sent him to Syria for medical treatment. Assad was helping him. So that shut her up. But this is just more of the propaganda that we're talking about.
But that's what I was saying.
Realize the incubator, let me tell you, because a lot of people that are your age don't remember this. I do remember the early 90s. The young girl who was announcing that the incubators were taken from their machines and killed, suffocated to death in Kuwait. This actually happened in Gaza, right? That actually happened in Gaza. Yeah. But back then, she was the daughter of the Kuwaiti ambassador. And she was trained by the CIA to act and to the talking points that she used. And of course, it was all proven false. The Iraqi troops never went in and killed any babies in the incubators. It's about as true as that Hamas has a base hidden under some hospital in Gaza. Give me a break. And Hamas is a guerrilla organization. Yeah. And trust me, they've studied guerrilla warfare, even though they're not socialists. And they've worked with socialists. I mean, one of the militias that took part in the October 7th operation out of Gaza was socialist. Right. But anybody knows anything about guerrilla warfare and what Che wrote knows that guerrillas have no base of operations. So when they were interrogating Che, when they captured him in Bolivia, they said, where was your encounter point? Where's your point to meet with your other comrades in the case of you escaping? They were trying to find their remaining fighters. And he said, we had none. We have no place to meet. We have no base. We have no permanent base because we're guerrillas. And he was actually telling the truth.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, wait, I almost lost my thought where I was going. Yeah. So Hamas also gave out a statement, and they were saying that they basically, to paraphrase, that they stand in solidarity with Syrian people's right to economic growth and independence. And then they also reminded the community who's the real enemy, which is the most important part of this whole issue is Israel.
Well, Israel has managed through their terror to unite groups that in recent history oppose each other, like Hezbollah and Hamas. Hezbollah, of course, tended to be pro-Assad. Hamas, because they're Sunni, tended to support certain aspects of the opposition against Assad. Later, they reconciled.
Yes,
Something
later
interesting
they
too.
did. Yep.
Look at the history of Golani's father.
Yeah.
He was a Nasserist, and he was Syrian, his father, but his Syria was one of those guys pushing for a more Nasserist type of socialism in Syria, which at that time opposed Assad's father. So he was imprisoned at one point, but he wasn't killed. The family returned to Syria in the 1980s when Assad's father was still in power. Assad himself didn't take over until 2000.
And there's literally this dude.
I'm just saying it's ironic because his father was a progressive. I would have been a Nasserist if I was in the Middle East at that time. I would say the Nasserists were the most correct. And his father, who was a progressive Nasserist, who was fighting for Palestinian rights in Syria, because many refugees went to Syria at the time. Right. The son is complete opposite. The son totally sold out, became a religious fundamentalist, and sold out to the West and the Israelis, which is quite sad.
Yeah, I mean, he was a part of Al Qaeda as well too. He was trained when he got out of prison in Iraq. He
fought Americans in Iraq and then joined up with the Americans. His father to be ashamed.
He was beheading people. I guess now he doesn't behead no more. He's a retiree. I guess everybody doesn't behead anymore in Idlib and all those in that place anymore. You know, it's very, very crazy what we're seeing right now. What do you expect out of this government? This new government. What do you expect?
Imperialists, they keep repeating themselves, the same tune. Once you know history, it's so easy to predict these things. Even the uniforms they use, right? There's a really funny meme that's going around on Twitter that shows Zelensky in the same exact uniform as Golani.
Yeah, I saw
that. The CIA uses the same uniforms, right? Just like the regime change that they did in Ukraine and the balkanization they're trying to do there.
Right. No, it's that's how you know, bro. That's how
they did it in Yugoslavia, like I said at the onset of the show. I mean, you just need to know the history.
Yeah. Biden himself said in the speech that it could be a risk. But why did you allow this? You know, like why are you down for this?
Biden was saying he supports the new people that were taking over in Syria while he was bombing them, because it wasn't just Israelis bombs. Like, this is the hypocrisy that we're facing. And all of this was part of it, probably, and I'm not 100% sure yet, of a deal between Trump and Putin that screwed over the oppressed peoples of the Arab world. That pisses me off.
And the Western media is only focusing on the ones that are celebrating. And I'm not going after anybody that's tired of a dictator being in power, but I'm tired of the hypocritical not showing the true integrity. You went and found one Syrian that can speak perfect English. How do I not know that she's a USID or CIA? How do I not know that she's not a plant?
She could be the daughter of the ambassador of the fake regime that's going to take over, just like they did in Kuwait.
But Westerners are going to look at this and they're going to be bamboozled. They're going to.
Did you see the meme of Guaido? Did you see the meme of Guaido that said he self-appointed himself the new president of Syria? Every time there's a regime change now, they use this fool of Guaido, right?
Yes, yeah. But it's just they're using the same tactics, and we got to remind people that they are literally using the same damn theater, the same damn tactics, because what I'm hearing from Syrians on the ground, especially that are not Sunni, not even just a Sunni, just Christian. Syria is very diverse most of
the army and most of the population of Syria, I think it's 60% are Sunni. Yeah. But again, many of those Sunnis are moderate Sunnis or Sunnis that are intermarried with Shia and other minorities.
Yeah, like the non-Sunnis are basically a lot of them. From what I saw and looking on social media, they are afraid of their lives, and I'm seeing executions being done. What makes this a better?
Trust me, there are Sunni men right now probably being shot for being married to a Shia or a Christian. So they'll go after Sunnis too. If they're not their type of Sunnis, they'll go after them too.
Now with the Kurds,
they don't care about the Kurds either. And it's ironic because the Kurds are Sunni, but they want to have an Arab Sunni supremacy that doesn't care about the Zionists. As a matter of fact, the Islamic State bases its idea off Zionism. Just like the Jewish state, like they're heavily influenced by the Zionists.
Do you think the Kurds will get any? Because I know they had like a small sliver.
The biggest irony ever about the Kurds is, and not a lot of people know this, Salah ad-Din, who's the most famous Arab liberator in history. He literally was the guy that freed Jerusalem from the Crusades. twice. He was in 2 wars with the British and the French, and he showed mercy on the Crusaders. He let them leave Jerusalem instead of massacring them. He showed he was better than the Christians that would massacre the other religions. So he was
the first terrorist.
He was just in battle, but he still prevailed in battle. Like they say in warfare, you have to be the most brutal. Not with Saladin; he was a gentleman. And guess what? Saladin, who's the most famous quote unquote Arab liberator, wasn't Arab. He was a Kurd, and he wasn't only a Kurd; he was a Kurd from Tikrit, which ironically is the hometown of Saddam Hussein, who went after the Kurds with U.S. weapons, mind you, which they turned a blind eye to at the time.
Wow.
Because he was using them against Shia Kurds, Iran, and they said, give him carte blanche because he was our client, right? The client of the U.S. empire, which the U.S. turned against later on, just like with bin Laden, Noriega, Panama, is a long list.
You prop them up and then they become our enemies. Isn't it beautiful?
Kissinger actually said the truth when he said the U.S. has no allies, only interests. And those interests can change, can't
they? And that's what I'm saying. When I feel that the first thing that they're going to do once they get well established and get more U.S. money, more weapons coming in, all this stuff like that, that this ATS, whatever they're going to call themselves, are going to go after Baghdad. They're going to go after what they always wanted to go after, and whatever ISIS and Al Qaeda wants to do to show the Islamic State. I won't be surprised if they start attacking and doing other attacks.
By the way, the United States had the capability to militarily defeat ISIS. They never did because they were supporting them behind the scenes.
Right.
Even though they went after Americans, they never went after Israelis, but ISIS did go after Americans at one point. And not only that, the Russians, right? Mm-hmm. They kicked ass when it came to ISIS because they really wanted to defeat them. They actually used their military capabilities to back up Assad to go after ISIS. Yeah. There was a small enclave, a faction, or not a faction, an enclave left in Syria that belonged to ISIS, and those are Golani's forces. Because of the Western backing, they've been able to take over, unfortunately.
Yeah, and I won't be surprised if this backlash. It won't, especially for Israel as well.
It's backlashing already. It's backlashing already when it comes to the religious minorities because they're saying this is for democracy, but it's like the extremist Sunnis are the only ones that are going to be able to exercise their rights. Right. And, the West likes to talk about the hijab and not forcing women to do this or that, especially the French imperialists, right? They make laws against the hijab, the Arab veil. These guys are the ones that are going to force women. Like Assad's wife, did you ever see her wear a hijab? Like they were very secular, and Assad speaks perfect English. She was educated in London. One of Gaddafi's sons was educated in London. Like, yeah, it doesn't mean they're friendly with the West, but it just shows that like they're very secular and they'll take what they can from the West, their education systems, and whatnot.
I heard reports that they were forcing people already to wear hijabs. I've already heard reports.
I wouldn't be surprised. And they're going into villages where there's like no presence of Muslims. They're going in the villages of like primarily Christians.
Right.
And they're trying to force them to be Muslim. That's completely against the tenets of the Quran. Yeah. I've heard stories of hostages of the ISIS, and they said there was no Quran in sight. So they're pretending to be Muslim. And the same thing with the Zionists. A lot of the Zionists are not religious Jews. They're just using religion to justify what they're doing. Yeah.
Right. No, but it's good that you mentioned that because people don't realize that. And when they do, they're like, okay, so what the hell is this all really is for? At the end of the day, you don't even believe in this person that you say you're chosen by.
By the way, I had a conversation once. I'm just thinking of this now. One of my books was about my time in student government at FAU. I was involved in a lot of controversial things at Florida Atlantic University back around like 2018, 2019. And one time there was a Jewish member of the House of Representatives. I don't know if he was Zionist or not, but I had a conversation with him about ISIS. And I asked him, I said, why has ISIS never attacked Israel? And he looked at me and he said, because they know that the Israelis will hit back hard. I said, isn't it also because Israel's backing ISIS against Assad? And he was silent, but he had a look on his face like, shit, this guy actually knows the truth.
Yeah. I mean, it's clear as that. This is the thing. Socialists and progressives, we have been saying for years that there is a coalition, secret coalition between ISIS and the Americas and Israel.
There was even talk that al-Baghdadi back in the day in ISIS in Iraq was actually originally an Israeli.
I mean, hold on. Let me bring it up because I remember reading something about this which is very, very important. People should see this.
Because you're talking to somebody who's been an anti-Zionist for over 20 years. So even when this stuff was not popular, I was into it. So I've been well versed in this stuff. My father's been to the Middle East. I'm very well versed in this.
Yeah, I mean because it was very secretive, and I've been talking about this with people.
By the way, just like the so-called Bin Laden, but they claim Bin Laden was dead several times before he ultimately died. If he'd even died, it could have been a double. We never saw his body. The same thing with al-Baghdadi. Like they reported al-Baghdadi had been killed like 20 times or something before he finally did. Like we don't even know what's the real truth, behind this.
Because what we know,
it was on video, but I'm talking about the terrorists here.
Mm-hmm.
Because who are the terrorists and who are the people that opposed Gaddafi out of Benghazi? Were terrorists, Al-Qaeda people. Some of them were held in Guantanamo, reconciled with the West, and then were used by the West. Very similar to what's going on in Syria.
Yeah, and then the CIA,
the Muslims in the Balkans were used.
The CIA was exposed by the Rolling Stone.
Yugoslavia as well.
The CIA was also exposed by the Rolling Stone magazine when they said that they found evidence that CIA was using ISIS-K to do terrorist attacks in Russia.
I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, Chechnya. Some of the guys that went to Libya were redheaded Chechens,
right?
That they imported to go after Gaddafi. And though the Chechens were the same ones that were trying to separate from Russia.
No, it's absolutely connects. It shows, and people should see this as a smack in our face because
they call them Libyan rebels, and they're redheaded guys with beards that are clearly Chechens.
Yeah, I mean,
a lot of these Syrians are actually Turkish. They're Turkish or from Iraq, or they're not native Syrians. Because Syrians are not divisive sectarian people. The sectarianism is imported by other elements.
And you see the connections with the Uyghurs as well too. And I'm not talking about the Uyghurs as a culture. I'm talking about how there has been shown that there's
You're talking about the separatists, because not all Uyghurs want to separate. A lot of them want to integrate with China because they see the benefit of it.
Right, and they don't bring that part up of the terrorist attacks that have happened in China and why China had to do a re-education program to help out the Uyghurs, and a lot of them, majority of them, are now in China living.
You ever hear of this alternative journalist that goes by Syrian Girl? I think she lives in Kuwait, but she's actually Syrian, and she used to be on Alex Jones' show. A lot of people forget that about her. And all I did was ask her one thing on Twitter a couple years ago, and she blocked me. All I did was say, because you support Alex Jones, you've co-hosted his show, and Alex Jones supports Trump. I didn't even accuse her of supporting Trump's policies. I just asked her, what do you think of the Muslim ban? She blocked me.
That's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, you think she would distance herself from Alex Jones and Trump, a lot of it is the right-wing libertarians trying to pass off as progressives,
right?
Saying that they support progressive governments abroad. I mean, look at the gray zone, for example.
Right.
Anya Parampil has praised Bolsonaro, and their number one reason why they do that is because he was anti-vaccine.
Right.
And we've talked about this. I think the three of us, you, me, and Chris Richards, about how there was a billionaire that was in exchange for supporting these alternative journalists, telling them that they had to take a stance against the vaccines at the height of the COVID crisis. So, they might not like Milei. Like Anya has very good views about Milei in Argentina. He's a terrible leader. She recognizes that. But she does, in fairly recent interviews, still praise Bolsonaro. And Bolsonaro, of course, helped make Brazil the number 2 in COVID deaths in the world. Of course,
it was very bad. It was very bad. Yeah, no, but like,
let alone being a fascist.
But like, what I'm saying is that, like, this regime change showed a lot of what the U.S. is willing to do just so they could topple people. And I'm pretty sure a lot of people are not okay with Al-Qaeda.
Well, there was people saying the reason why the U.S. bombed Syria once they installed their own people was just to show that they can do whatever they want. I would say that's 1% of the reason. The major factor was they wanted to destroy the defenses, the air defenses, and the social institutions,
with the risk of empowering
in case
terrorists.
Assad or an Assad ally came back to power.
with the risk of empowering terrorists. Straight up.
Well, they're actively empowering the terrorists. Yeah.
Yeah.
And they think they can control them. And like you said, it could backfire. There's even a military term for that, imperial term, blowback. There can be major blowback for this. Certainly, there already is blowback when it comes to Syrian democracy because they're going after minorities. They're doing things that autocrats and tyrants would do.
Yeah. So we're seeing a change in history right now. This is a huge dramatic change in history. Dude, for instance, Macron tried to get Poland to send troops into Russia. You heard about that?
No, but I'm not surprised.
And Poland
Macron cannot even keep his troops in Africa. They're getting thrown out, and now he's threatening to go into Ukraine or trying to push the Poles to do it. He's a completely pathetic leader, and now he's sucking up to Trump again. I mean, Macron is just completely pathetic. What's interesting about Macron is his VP is supposed to be a leftist. The leftist faction in what was it, the Popular Front in France, won overwhelmingly the seats in the parliament. At that point, his VP under the French Constitution was supposed to be from that party, and he picked like a very minuscule third party, like moderate, as his VP instead. And I said, that's a Napoleonic move. That's a dictatorial move, and but that's Macron, man. Like he's pathetic.
But sadly, he didn't get what he wanted because Poland said no. But it's like this ever since the election happened. You got
they're saying that even Poland wants to have some land in Ukraine. They do have historic ties to Ukraine, not just Russia.
Yes, they do.
I mean, the word Ukraine in the Slavic language means borderland. There used to be lands that belonged to Poland and Russia, really. There was no Ukraine.
Right. They're Slavics.
But they are Slavic cousins. They're South Slavs, yeah. The Yugoslavians are also South Slavs.
That I've said in past episodes that I predicted that Ukraine was going to fall, Poland was going to take their historic lands back, and Russia was going to take their historic lands back.
Well, it looks like with the Trump deal that Putin will be able to do whatever he wants now in Ukraine.
Well, Ukraine's a failed state at this point. I don't know how
Ukraine is a revisionist history regime.
Yeah.
A perfect example: Odessa was founded by Catherine the Great, who was a very powerful Tsarina of Russia.
Right.
And they took down her statue. Like literally, the city was named by her, founded by her. Right. And they took down her statue because they were so ashamed of the fact that their major port city was originally a Russian city.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, this whole aggression towards Russia is going to get us blown up. Like,
you know how everybody pushed all the pro-Zionists pushed the anti-Semitic thing? Yeah. What about Russophobia? Like everything they're doing is Russophobia. Didn't they even prevent like Russian players that were not political to go into the Olympics because Russia happened to try to liberate Ukraine at that time? Like this is just complete Russophobia, and there's a long history of it: McCarthyism, anti-communist pogroms, all of that.
I feel that the Russophobia is looked over just like how African poverty is looked over.
I mean, look at the Uhuru movement. They're actually turning Russophobia into anti-blackness because they're going after Uhuru, and the sentencing is just in a few days from now. Yeah. They might send the chairman who's 82 years old, 5 years in prison. That could kill the guy. And over what? Oh, Lee Camp's been doing great work, by the way. He's interviewed Uhuru a couple of times. I'm very happy to see that, and I'm happy that you interviewed him as well.
We're gonna get him back on, definitely.
Yeah, that would be awesome. But they're using the Russian hysteria now to go after black progressive groups like Uhuru, and it's pathetic. And I don't see Trump going to pardon them.
No, I don't.
And not only that, I mean, he could pardon them even if they're not sentenced to jail time. They were sentenced on the lesser charge of conspiring to be foreign agents, which actually was similar to the Alex Saab case, because the Alex Saab, they were only trying to go after him in the end for conspiring to money launder. But of course, the media didn't portray it that way. The media was very unfair with Alex Saab, like they're unfair with Uhuru, and all these groups that they find controversial that they can pick on, they can intimidate to try to send a chilling effect to the activist community overall within the U.S. empire.
Yeah, and the thing with Georgia, which is very, very important for people to understand, only 40% of Jordanians, the last polls have shown, agree that Russia was involved. But the president himself literally said that.
Wait, did you say Georgia as in the Caucasus? I thought you said Jordan.
Jordanian. Georgia. In the Caucasus Mountains.
Yeah, but then they're called Georgians. They're not called Jordanians.
Jordanians are from Jordan. Thank you for correcting me. I get mixed up sometimes between the two. But 40% of them.
What happened in Georgia is you had protesters that were trying to do a color revolution or a
It's
counter
only like a
revolution
few thousand of
because
them.
they
It's not
found the
even-
government that the people elected in a new government too pro-Russia.
right.
But they use these people. To me, it's offensive to call them protesters because I've protested most of my life. They are rioters that are agents.
Straight up.
It's like when you call somebody a journalist and they're just a propagandist. It pisses me off because I have a journalist background as well.
Yeah.
These aren't real protesters. These aren't real journalists that are backing what's going on in Georgia.
They're not, and it's
We're talking about the country of Georgia for those who are just listening now, not the state.
not the state. No, but literally, they just want a Ukraine 2.0, and I really feel like
Taiwan will be the next Ukraine if they persist against China, provoking China in the mainland with all the U.S. backing of the Taiwan separatists. So not everybody in Taiwan wants to separate. I've seen these so-called protests in Taiwan emerge and in Hong Kong where somebody would show up and say, I'm from this country too, but I consider myself Chinese. And what do? They lynch them. They beat them maybe to death sometimes. Yeah. And it's like, okay, so that seems like anti-Chinese racism right there. And a lot of people are waving the British flag, especially in Hong Kong. I don't think Taiwan was ever under British control, but like in Hong Kong, Japan. They're waving the British flag. They're like, come back and invade us. Come back and make us a colony again. We hate that we have Chinese blood. Make us white, whatever. Like these people are.
And the fact that people believe that. The fact that people in the U.S. actually believe that, like,
and they think that these separatists literally in Hong Kong are for democracy. Yeah, they're not for democracy. They're not for the majority of Hongkongese people think that they're Chinese. Bruce Lee, who everybody knows is a famous Chinese martial art, he was from Hong Kong. Right. Jackie Chan, another great martial, he considers himself Chinese. They speak Cantonese. Cantonese comes from Canton, China, on the mainland, South China. Right. Okay, they speak a dialect of Chinese called Cantonese. How can these people not be Chinese? Give me a break.
No. It's just all these conflicts that we're naming. I'm going to see this heat up. Like this whole South Korea thing was a whole left field. Like that was unexpected. That guy's a kook. Just all of a sudden, it's because he's afraid of his opposition party.
He accused the opposition of being sympathetic North Korea.
Yeah,
being sympathetic North Korea means you want unification.
Right.
There are people that are not necessarily socialists like Kim Jong-un that want to unify with Ukraine with the other part of Korea for whatever reason. That doesn't mean that they're pro North Korea, but they're using that kind of like as a McCarthyist thing, the South Korean regime.
Yeah, it's definitely McCarthy 2.0. And I'm glad that they was able to stop that because that's insane. This country was already under dictatorship regime in the 80s and beforehand when they split and after the Korean War, and now you're going to try to put a new generation under a dictator regime. Like, what is up with Joe Biden?
You'd be surprised. Shamar, but if you go back, I think it was 2022, the same year. I think it was April 2022 when the Russians went into Ukraine. So I think it was like early 2022, just before that. You remember when Russia went into Kazakhstan for a little bit?
Yes.
I actually supported, not the Russians going into Kazakhstan. I supported the people protesting the Kazakhstan regime because it's a very corrupt regime. Mm-hmm. And I wouldn't even say that regime was pro-Russian. They're just pro-Russian in words. But when Putin went in and backed that dictator up to crush the rebellion, I opposed that. When he went into Ukraine, I supported it. Why? Everything has to do with context. Who is Putin going after when he went to Ukraine? Azov battalion, fascists, who for 8 straight years have been watching bombing my comrades in Novorossiya, in Donetsk, and Luhansk, in Crimea. They bombed civilians on a beach in Crimea, for God's sakes. Yeah. Long-range missiles. I mean, how much more provocation? So, yeah, I'm looking forward if Trump does make a deal, there'll be peace in Ukraine. Some of that land will have to be given back to Russia. It was originally Russian. But at the expense of the people of the Middle East, hell no. I hope the people of Syria rise up and bring back the democracy that they had under Assad.
Yeah.
I'm not saying things are perfect under Assad. I'm not saying things are perfect under Assad.
No, it could be better.
He was a force against the Zionist regime that they had to destroy. It's like when they went after Saddam Hussein. As a matter of fact, Assad was far more progressive than Saddam Hussein was.
Yes. That's the other thing that people have to know.
To the West, like Saddam Hussein did, and so it's a shame that this happened.
His father stole the country in 1967. We know this, but he was definitely different from his father. He made mistakes.
Well, I would say in the beginning, and Chris made this point on the Revolutionary Alliance chat earlier today. that there was an alliance between Nasser and Assad, which was great. I'm talking about Assad's father.
Yeah.
There was an alliance between Nasser and the first Assad against the Zionists, which was great. They almost won the war against Israel in the late 60s into the 70s. There was a couple wars there. But what ended up happening is Egypt left the alliance, and the people that were pushing for a Nasserist type socialism in Syria were suppressed. People like Golani's father, ironically.
Yes.
And because of that, then that division happened. I think what should have happened was Egypt stay in the coalition, or even if they didn't stay in the coalition, Assad's father shouldn't have gone after the Nasserists the way he did. But a lot of this is also
was my criticism right there.
From encouraged by the West. They want to encourage these divisions, either political or sectarian divisions.
Yeah, and lastly, for people to understand, Syria was very, very sanctioned as well.
By the way, Syria, as far as I'm concerned, has more of a right to go into Lebanon and claim Lebanon as their country again. Lebanon was part of Syria until the French and the British split it up. Then the United States has a right to maintain a presence in Syria and steal Syrian oil. The Lebanese and Syrian people have a history with one another. So who's the United States to judge if something like that happened? I'm not saying it's going to. But guess what? Kuwait was part of Iraq and was separated by the British to take more oil. So when Saddam went in there and the United States gave him a green light, so they set him up because they used that then to go into Iraq because he changed the oil prices. He wouldn't completely sell out to the West. So because he didn't sell out enough, then they tried to use the fact that he used those weapons against minorities. Weapons they gave him that they turned a blind eye for years. Yes. This is the hypocrisy of the empire, man.
Anything with the U.S. hands in it, people have to question what's really going to happen. They have to question it. It's not good. It's not good. This whole idea of being happy that certain people are pro-U.S., I'm done. I'm going to give you a strong lecture on why you should not be pro-U.S.
By the way, is there any we're talking about U.S. regime, but is there any comments or anything yet?
No, that's it. We only had 2 for today. But it's
I only
fine.
saw one. What was the other one?
It was just a fan saying hi.
Oh, Miguel.
What's up, Miguel?
I don't know which Miguel that is, but salutations, my comrade. Miguel is a Spanish name, so he's probably a fellow Latino. Salutations.
So we're going to be doing this every 2 weeks around this time.
Yeah, we ought to have a panel next time, at least 3 of us.
Let's invite some motherfuckers.
Well, yeah, Lee's very busy, but maybe bring him back on. But we'd have to look for a topic.
We'll have one.
When I was on Lee's show, just after he was thrown off Russia Today TV, when he was with Mint Press, I think he's still with Mint Press. I met the founder of Mint Press of Venezuela. I went to the Russia Today TV show in Washington and saw him there from the front row. Met him a few times. He was with me at the Venezuelan embassy in 2019 in DC too. But when he interviewed me on Mint Press, I think like about a year ago, maybe a little more, he interviewed me about Alex Saab, and Saab was still held then, and then he was freed, and then with 6 months later, Assange was freed. That was a great thing that happened this year. But I'm thinking a good title for our next show, we'll do it sometimes before New Year's, and we'll call it Resolution Revolution. That's our New Year's resolution, right? If we'll do the show every other week, got to do it before New Year's. Yeah, Revolution, and we'll have you, me, and another comrade on. And it wouldn't necessarily be Lee because we probably have to schedule way ahead.
Yeah, we'll find somebody to put in.
Chris Richards or some other comrade, maybe Dust James. You know Dust James.
We'll bring Dust back.
Do like a special on Resolution Revolution, man.
Yeah.
The new year, it'll be under the Trump regime, but we'll continue to fight the imperialism from within.
Yeah. Don't forget to like, share, and comment, guys. And down below, I know you see it, the IG page for Palestinians that need help in Gaza. Please donate. Power relief.
That's Zuckerberg. I wouldn't be surprised if that gets censored soon, right?
Yeah.
Not that I'm an Elon Musk fan, but he tends to censor less.
We haven't even talked about Gaza, and we need to talk about Gaza next time because there's a lot that's going on.
Well, I did mention that Israel actually killed babies in incubators in Gaza recently.
Right. Yeah,
unlike the fake story that was purported by the daughter of the Kuwaiti ambassador.
Yeah. Just the updates on what's happening right now. It's very, very bad what's happening. So every other week, you're going to see us Thursday, 8:30 p.m. at this time, and we're going to have a very good discussion on the political.
Well, let me look on the calendar here before we go.
Yeah.
26th is perfect. The day after Christmas, 2 Thursdays
Day
from
after
now.
Christmas.
And we could do like a revolution, man. I think that's how we could maybe get like a promo pic with like a champagne bottle or something. And
Yeah,
our
I'll
New
get
Year's
the flyer
resolution is revolution, my brother.
Hell yeah. So, Alex, I'll see you later, my brother, and everybody that was watching. Thank you for the likes. We got 26 likes. Nice. Woohoo! 26 likes. Pretty nice. So
we had a hell of a
like,
show with
share.
Rebecca, didn't we?
Yes. And that was one of the most viewed shows on YouTube, which is really,
and you know, the bots have been trying to stop her, man. Like these guys, I don't know if they're financed by an NGO or DeSantis or what. I didn't get a chance to mention it in the part of the show when I was on. But you know what? As revolutionaries, we're not going to be intimidated. We're not going to be silenced. We're going to speak out against empire in all its forms.
Yep. And you will be put on mute on Twitter. Don't be looking for an argument with me.
Or block. Or block. As far as I'm concerned, it's not censoring, it's maintaining my sanity. Certain individuals, especially when they use fake image and their bots, they just need to be blocked.
We will not be engaging with you guys. We are grown. We don't have time.
We have to go about the duties of you know, continue to advance the revolution.
Right, exactly. You're not important. that was just so immature, so ridiculous. And then they
I told some of them, I said, I'm actually here in Florida still. Like they say, oh, she ran away. She's like, I'm here in Florida. Come and look for me, motherfucker. They started getting on my nerves, man, because they're messing with a revolutionary, bro. I'm telling you.
All right.
I think it's late enough. I think it's late enough in the show where I can swear. So
no, it's great. You're good. I'll talk to you later, my friend Alex.
All right.
And everybody have a really good night.
Collectively transforming community, peace in our human family, volume of unity, divine light shining individually, collectively transforming community, peace in our human family. Growth as above, so below. Feel the pain in my soul, the red pill dissolved. Organized, no matter the cost. Politicians starts wars, they don't fight, they sit in the poor. And nothing lasts forever as long as we stay together. Give hell to the masses, watch the unity rapture. This is for the kids and the culture. It's one love, one growth, one light, light warriors.